want to confuse the public. Actually, gawa na yung guidelines, may mga final improvements na lang.
The public is indignant over government's hasty decisions in changing quarantine and lockdown phases without clear guidelines. How should government implement a better COVID-19 control strategy? We discuss in this episode of The Chiefs. Welcome to this special edition of The Chiefs. Ako po si Robbie Alampay. Kasama po natin si Ami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star and Ed Lingao of One News. Chiefs, good evening.
Happy Wednesday. It's a hump day today.
Nakasilent, nakamute kaya ta, Ami?
Nakamute. Hindi. Nakamute pa.
Oh, sige, but pag-usapan very quickly lang, Ami, give us a rundown on what's the developments on the political front. Medyo malaking ano rin today.
Okay. Baka na. Well, nag-clear na nga si Senator Ping at si Sen ng first tandem sila na nag-declare at mukhang palaban na rin si Manila Mayor Isko Moreno. Yung daw mga crystal na nandun sa Disneyland should be fired. And see you in October, sabi niya. So we are all waiting for October.
Oh, in the meantime, sa PDP laban, anong sabi ni Bongo? See you in October din ba si Bongo?
Nag-issue kagad siya ng statement na inuulit niya, I am not interested in the president.
At yung kanyang destiny is nakasalalay sa mga Dutertes pa rin.
Oh,
So may bagyo sa langit, may bagyo rin sa lupa.
Okay, well, speaking of bagyo sa lupa, nagkakagulo pa rin sa Metro Manila and we're not yet talking about the actual bagyo, which is also a big story, but we are talking still about COVID, confusion about COVID, and how we're gonna open up. So let's start tonight with Interior Undersecretary Epimaco Densing III. I-ready nyo na po yung Twitter accounts nyo dahil tuwing nag-guest dito si Yusek Densing, hindi umiilag. In fairness to Yusek Densing, parati tayo pinagbibigyan, always willing to answer our questions. Yusek Densing, welcome po to the Chiefs.
Yeah, thank you, Robbie, Ed, and Amy. And
Okay.
to your viewers, good evening.
Unang tanong po galing sa Twitter. Ano ba nangyari? Ito na naman, nag-announce kayo pagkatapos, well, to make a long story short, it seems as if hindi pala pinag-iisipan bago i-announce.
No, I have to be very clear, no? The policy shift has been approved. The mayors of the National Capital Region, we met with them in the morning prior to the emergency meeting yesterday. While there was confusion and there was some others who didn't understand, at the end of the day, they were able to understand the policy shift. It's just the confusion is with the public because this is actually an overhaul of what we are doing in the past. It's entirely different. We're talking about alert protocols, although I won't be discussing in detail yet at the moment because there was a polishing that was made because of the postponement. But what is important is everybody or the public must understand this policy shift that we're doing. And for example, kung tinuloy natin ngayon, yung GCQ na pinag-uusapan natin, which is really the confusing part there, no? Actually, dito sa policy shift na ito, na alert levels, kung naka-alert level 4, for example, hindi pa rin pwede ang church and religious gatherings. I think the use of the GCQ made it more confusing. That's why we're not using that term anymore, but more on the alert levels. And of course, hindi ko po na madidiscuss in detail ang alert levels, but just the concept of it, or to do away with the province-wide or region-wide lockdowns. We're now going of people. For example, in this new policy setup of the alert levels, regardless of the alert level, the non-essential activities can now exist to happen. No? Let's say gusto mong magbiyahe for tourism purposes, papayagan yan into regardless of the alert level. What is being prohibited right now are specific activities that are the main source of COVID-19 infections and spread, which are crowded places, closed places, and activities that promote close contact. So in-identify na po yan dun sa operational guidelines, and that will be publicly discussed after tomorrow's meeting.
Pero
Yusek,
sir, as of Monday, nung Monday lang, si Secretary Roque still released a list of GCQ areas for Wednesday with the granular lockdowns and MGCQ areas and GCQ areas with heightened restrictions, along with the granular lockdowns. So that was supposed to take effect today kung hindi natuloy yung
Yeah,
postponement.
i-clear ko yun. What we're talking about are protocols for the pilot area, which is NCR only. The rest of the country will still be governed by the old omnibus guidelines. And once we become successful in this new policy shift in the National Capital Region, which was identified to be the pilot area, there will be another tweak, most probably, or adjustment in the protocols. Then kung talagang maayos talaga to at maraming mabibenepisyo nating kababayan, including of course hindi natin mapalago o mapadami ang COVID-19 infections, then this will be something that will be done on a nationwide basis starting after September 30. So
Yusek,
sa pilot lang ito, Ed.
balikan ko lang Yusek yung confusion, ano? Kasi ang confusion and nadidismaya ang mga tao, lalo na yung mga businessman, yung bigla-bigla daw binaliktad. Kasi nag-iintay na nga daw sila, they were all prepared. Lalo yung isang nagre-restaurant, sabi niya, bumili na ako in bulk ng karne, naghahanda na kami bukas. Ngayon bigla-bigla, 1 week, postponed, anong gagawin ko dito? Ganon bang pag-iisip na sabi ng PCCI, this is a half-studied policy shift for such a major move. Yun ang sinasabi nila, bakit naman daw bigla-bigla?
Well,
Hindi naman nila inaano na, sige, bahala kayo, gusto niyo mag-shift ng ganyan. Pero sana daw, in-explain muna, tapos inayos, bago nag-announcement, at para hindi na binabawi at the 11th hour.
Yeah, I mean, siguro hindi ko masasagot diretso yan as I was really not part of the decision-making process. But if I were to just to discuss the reason of the few days of extension, it's really just to prepare the public and to make the public digest this new set of protocols. Kasi mawawala na nga itong mga GCQ, MECQ, ECQ, or even GCQ, mapapalitan ng alert levels. That will be explained in detail after tomorrow's meeting. So yun lang, baka magkakaroon pa nga ng frustration kung pinush natin ito dahil hindi pala nila naintindihan itong policy shift. It's more on activities being prohibited or restricted depending on the alert level. Kaya banggit ko sa simbahan, kagaya nito, excited din yung mga NCR mayors and they also accepted the fact na alert level 4 sila based on the criteria of the Department of Health. No? Ang mangyayari po nito, halimbawa lang nangyari ito, akala na simbahan, pwede na sila at 10%. Actually, at alert level 4, hindi pa pwede ang religious gathering.
But Yusek, I hope you don't mind. We hear what you're saying, and certainly the public can use the time to digest, as you said, no, para ma-process nila and they can manage their expectations, they can plan accordingly. But when we talk to LGUs and when we talk to frontliners and hospitals and so on, they're saying na there were no guidelines to digest in the first place. That was precisely the root of the problem. Parang ngayon lang pinag-iisipan yung guidelines. Na yun na yung announcement, wala pa yung guidelines.
I'd like to correct that, Rob. There were already guidelines. In fact, that was twice presented to the IATF for approval. One was last Thursday, and the other one was yesterday, Tuesday. It's just because of it's a major shift that was really different from the old guidelines to be implemented again, pilot in the National Capital Region. That was the decision. Bigyan natin ng konting panahon para ma-discuss sa publiko at maintindihan po nila. In fact, later on, when the business sector will hear of this is something that will be more acceptable to them because it will be more business-friendly to some extent. Alam nyo, may basis din po ito. For example, we have now statistics that all over the Philippines, 80% of the cases in the local governments or in the localities came from 11 to 30% of the barangays. In the NCR, it's only 12%. So the policy shift is very important. Kasi dapat ang nila-lockdown mo lang yung 12%. In the old guidelines, pag talagang marami ka nakikitang cases, regardless kung nasaan yan, you lock down the whole 100% of the province or the region. But this time around, we were going to lock down only the areas where the COVID-19 is really prevalent and there are clusters of cases. At not to mention that even the non-essential movement or activities are even allowed. So na-identify na natin yung mga super spreader activities na ipagbabawal in this new alert level policy.
Sir, para lang klaro, we understand magagawa pa kayo ng guidelines. Okay, we grant you that.
Yeah,
Pero
meron na.
Yes, sir. Pero at least in broad strokes, in very broad strokes, so yung granular lockdowns, malino naman yan eh. You lock down, for example, a building, a street, a barangay, or a sitio, and yun, walang labas-masok yun,
Yes.
di ba? For, I think, 14 days.
Correct.
Tama, diba? So, more or less yun, malino yun. Yung alert level 1, 2, 3, 4, that is an alert level imposed on the entire city, ganun ho ba?
In the for the case of NCR, the whole NCR. Then later on, pag maayos na to, per province na.
Okay, so yung alert level 1 being the loosest and 4 being the strictest, so kung alert level 4, for example, yung buong NCR, lockdown yun ng NCR. Hiwalay pa yun sa granular lockdown ng barangay, for example.
Yung alert level 4 is not even lockdown. Ang mayayari dito, magiging dalawa lang. Either lockdown ka, na walang apor-apor, except of course, meron tayong 1 or 2 or 3 exceptions, or nandun ka sa alert level 1, 2, 3, 4. Dalawa na lang yan. So wala ka ng MGCQ, GCQ, MECQ, or ECQ. Alert level na lang, 1, 2, 3, 4. Baka may 5 pa kung sakasakali. Kaya ayaw ko muna i-discuss in detail kasi meron pang dinadagdag dahil
Pero I'm sorry, nakakalito po eh. Kasi sinabi nyo, either naka-lockdown ka o hindi. Pagkatapos meron 1, 2, 3, 4. Saan po mag-uumpisa yung lockdown? Sa 1 at 2? Or sa 3 at 4?
Yung Robbie, yung 1, 2, 3, 4, yun yung mga ina-identify natin yung level of restrictions dun sa identified activities.
Parang graduations.
Yes, graduated. Ngayon, kung talagang yung probinsya mo, halimbawa, yung NCR, pagpalagay natin, yung cases talagang everywhere na, magla-lockdown ka na. Yung lockdown talaga na experience natin last year. Itong 1, 2, 3, 4, parang graduated. There's a percentage of activities that will be allowed depending on the alert level.
Binago lang yung pangalan ng mga
Oo, sir, parang binago lang ang pangalan.
ng community quarantine. So,
Ano ba yan?
Kasi for example, in MECQ, Amy, even non-essential movement or travel is not allowed under MECQ. Dito sa alert levels na ginagawa natin, even non-essentials can move as long as it's not part of the identified restricted activity or sector.
Saan papasok yung granular lockdown? Kasi marami nagtatanong sa akin, lalo na yung mga taga-condo. We asked you this already before, no? Ila-lockdown nyo ba yung buong building, by floor, by house? Saka
May rules na tayo dyan, yeah.
Kung clustering, gaano karami before an entire building or by floor lang ang lockdown? Ano yun? Meron na bang ganun?
Meron tayong clusters dyan. This was approved as early as last year. Pag meron kang isa o dalawang case in one floor will be locked down as a granular lockdown. No? But if there are cluster of cases within the building, the whole building will be locked down. In this time around, standard na tayo, 14 days.
In the meantime, Yusek, looking forward to September 15, no? Assuming na sa September 15 papasok tong bagong guidelines. What's the process for announcing for September 15 to make sure na hindi na mauulit itong nangyari? What is the step-by-step process for consulting with the LGUs and then announcing to the public?
Well, for the pilot areas, NCR, na-consult na sila. That's why I was saying the NCR mayors were already 100% supportive of this policy shift. No? And they want this policy shift to be successful in the National Capital Region. Ang frustration nga nila, hindi na-implement. Lahat sila was supportive, no? And they were ready to implement. Tomorrow, there will be a meeting of the IETF. I think we will now finalize with a little twitch on the operating guidelines. Then Friday or even after the IETF meeting, baka i-announce na ni Spokes. And the details will also be announced. The criteria for declaring the alert levels and what are the restricted activities in the various alert levels, including the percentage of allowance or allowing certain activities. Then I think for a number of days, puro public discussion so that everybody, at least in the National Capital Region, will be able to understand this overhaul of the protocols in fighting COVID-19. And hopefully, even before September 15, baka sakaling ma-implementa. Nakalagay naman sa resolution is whichever comes first.
Sir, what's alert level 4 like? Just to give us an idea kung ano kaiba ng alert level 4 doon sa granular lockdown. What's it like? What's allowed? What's not allowed? What kind of movement will we see in the streets?
Yung alert
And what capacities are we looking at?
Yeah, we've already identified activities of yung three C's na binanggit ko, no? Sa alert level 4 being the highest, 100% restriction of those activities that is identified.
Ano kaya yun? Sample.
Di ko na muna i-discuss, Amy. It would be better that it will be officially announced and discussed tomorrow by spokes after the IATF approves.
Pero i-explain muna ha, before you start implementing it.
Yes, definitely. This is the reason why dinelay natin para nga masabi natin sa publiko so that the public can digest and understand this shift. At I hope they will understand that magiging advantageous po to sa sitwasyon. Right now, we're trying to balance the economy where businesses can thrive, even the non-essentials. I think maganda po ito.
No, but I hope you don't mind, and definitely we all agree, no? Parang give them time, little less than 2 weeks to consider, or less than a week to consider this, and then ready tayong lahat. But it just begs the question of, bakit ngayon lang naisip yun na teka muna, let's give the public time, let's start with the information campaign, linawin muna natin lahat, and then tsaka natin i-announce. Then why did that happen? We're already in our second year of this pandemic, and to be honest, this is not the first time that kind of confusion has happened.
Well, siguro in the pre-implementation side, this was already discussed for the longest time, more than a month, no? Because the policy shift was approved in principle even as early as August. It was just when we found out that everybody was looking forward to this policy shift, we found out that everybody or many of our citizens in the National Capital Region were not able to digest yet. In fact, at the last minute, we had to make this to be understood by our mayors in the NCR. And nung naintindihan na nila yesterday, they were 100% supportive of this. And again, I understand their frustration because all of us really expected that we should start implementing it today. But because we got that feedback that many people are misinterpreting the shift, there was a suggestion during the IATF meeting to defer it to a few days for public consumption and digestion.
Yeah, but did we hear you right in saying that even at the last minute, even some LGU leaders were still confused?
Sa National Capital Region, yes, there were still clarifications made. And then when they were clarified, they said, maganda pala ito. Ito yung inaantay na naming dahan-dahang pagbubukas ng ekonomiya. At the same time, the granular lockdowns will ensure that talagang walang galawan ng tao. At hopefully, hindi makapag-spread when they move.
Oh, but sir, I hope you don't take it as hindi po ako nangungutya. I really just gusto ko lang malinawan kung paano nga because this is the question of a lot of people. But you're talking about the eve of the announcement. I mean, you're saying, we started off this program with you saying na, actually, malinaw na sa lahat malinaw sa lahat ng opisyal Nung binigay lang namin sa public, nalito lang yung public. So now we give them time. But now you're saying that up until the eve of the announcement, even Metro Manila mayors did not know what was going to come down.
Well, we talked about it even as early as last week, and meron na nagkaroon pa ng clarifications as of morning. And we were talking about the same provisions of the guidelines. No? It was just more of clarifications yesterday morning.
Sir, napag-usapan na yung LGU sa medyo bubukod ako ng kaunti. There's been a report coming from Cebu. In fact, we're talking to Secretary Joy Concepcion. Ang sabi niya, Cebu City has unilaterally imposed its own bakuna bubble via an executive order by Mayor Rama. First of all, is that allowed? Ano yung policy with regard to the bakuna bubble? We were on the impression na hindi pa under implementation yung bakuna bubble.
Yeah, it cannot happen right now. A government cannot implement such a policy. The Department of Justice has already given their opinion that until and unless everybody is given the opportunity with an abundant supply of vaccines to be vaccinated, then we cannot impose a policy where there is a bakuna bubble or only those who are vaccinated will be allowed to enter into public places. No? So if it's in the form of an executive order, then we will have to communicate with the mayor of Cebu City, si Mayor Rama, to tell him to recant and amend that specific executive order. There are more than a number of mayors who made that in the past, and we asked them to recant and revise, and they did. Otherwise, that could be an evidence for us to send them a show cause order. In the meantime, we will ask him to withdraw so that hindi na po natin mapadalhan ng show cause.
Pero kung private entrepreneur ako, can I do it on my own, in my business?
And that is, Amy, that is the question that I was asking our officials. While it cannot be a government policy, whether national or local, to implement a bakuna bubble, the question is, can a private entity or private establishment establish its own rules of whom they can allow to enter into their establishment? Ang pananaw ko kasi, kung ako may-ari ng restaurant, pwede kong sabihin lahat ng mga nakasando, bawal pumasok. Lahat na nakachinelas, bawal pumasok. Pero baka lang and that's a legal question. Can they on their own, motu proprio, say, ang pwede lang pumasok sa restaurant ko na mga nakabakuna lang? And that's not imposed, that's not a government policy, but simply a policy of the private establishment. That should be the question that must be asked.
And that's unresolved yet? That's still
Unresolved yet.
Ano?
Unresolved yet.
Okay.
Okay, we will have to monitor that among other things. Maraming salamat po, DILG Undersecretary Ipamako Densing. Sir,
Salamat
always a
po,
pleasure.
magandang gabi, sir.
Salamat po.
Thank you. Thank you.
Please stay with us. The Chiefs will be right back.
Hi,
Mayor?
sir. Magandang gabi.
Audio check po.
Magandang
Good
gabi.
evening po.
Hi Ed, magandang gabi. Robbie.
Good evening po. Welcome back, the Chiefs here on One News. Ako po si Robbie Alampay. Kasama natin si Ami Kamintuan of the Philippine Star and Ed Lingao of One News. And now joining us, Marikina City Mayor Marcy Teodoro. Good evening, Mayor Teodoro.
Robbie, magandang gabi.
Hi, sir.
Sir Ed, magandang gabi at sa mga nanonood at nakikinig sa atin ngayon.
Magandang gabi po. I don't know if you watched the earlier segment with DILG Undersecretary Ipamako Densing, but essentially he said, actually malinaw na naman sa lahat eh. Lininaw namin sa LGUs, malinaw na yung guidelines, maybe some fine-tuning. Nung in-announce namin, napansin lang namin, yung public ang nalito. I hope I'm capturing that fairly enough. But I'm curious, sir, as an LGU leader, as mayor of Marikina, what was your vantage point on what happened over the past 2 days?
Robbie, let me refer you to the pronouncement of the spokesperson of NTF, of the National Task Force earlier. The NTF provided a statement along that matter. Sinabi nila na kaya hindi itinuloy yung policy shift. It's a policy shift. It's not hindi to simpleng classification, pagbabago ng classification. Sinabi nila dahil nung huling meeting namin, ay maraming mga tanong, paglilinaw, and kailangan i-clarify ito. Yung huling meeting na to nangyari kahapon ng umaga hanggang tanghali. So until such period of time, talagang marami pang nililinaw at marami pang tinatanong. Isang bagay, halimbawa, yung ayuda do sa mga area na ila-lockdown. Paano ang pagbibigay nito? Paano yung provision nito? Maliban doon, yung mga intra and interzonal travel, halimbawa sa bahagi ng Marikina, kung may granular lockdown sa amin, paano yung intra and interzonal manggagaling doon sa outside of the city, considering nasa boundary kami ng Rizal. Ay, yung mga ganun, we are still clarifying those points. At ayon na rin doon sa NTF spokesperson on the pronouncement made earlier, sabi nila na yung guidelines hindi pa handa, kaya hindi itinuloy yung policy shift that is supposed to happen today. So I think that proves for a fact na marami pa talagang pinag-uusapan at marami pang hindi nakahanda talaga, maliban doon sa sinasabi natin that the public should be informed. That's very basic. Any policy should be able to withstand public testability, and there should be clarity in not only in the pronouncement but as well as with the framework, the mechanism that we are going to adopt. Secondly, we should be able to determine yung capacity of the LGU to implement such policy shift. I think hindi pa rin nadidetermine natin yon sa level ng mga LGU. Kaya pag tinanong mo yung mga mayors, sinasabi nga nila, we're asking for clarifications on several issues.
Yes, but you're asking for clarifications now, sir.
No.
One basic question is: were you consulted prior to the announcement?
There were consultations, but we only received the written draft guidelines. I personally asked for a written draft guidelines so that we could study on how to effectively implement the said policy shift. And we received that draft guidelines only in the afternoon of yesterday. So pag nag-aralan mo, titingnan mo kung may question ka, how could you now, given the short period of time before the announcement, it was the guidelines were provided to us, the written guidelines were provided to us on the eve of the day of the implementation. I think there is impracticality on it.
By
Sir,
this
tama. Sige po, go ahead.
guidelines, ano po sa pagkakaintindi niyo, since Metro Manila will be the pilot area, ano ang pagkakaintindi niyo ng pagkakaiba dito sa policy shift na to?
At the outset, ang sabi nga namin parang pareho lang yung mga quarantine policy natin, yung restrictions, at yun nga tinatanong namin ano yung pagkakaiba. Saka how would it really achieve the objective of balancing economic concerns with that of the health concerns. We're asking for metric of evaluation, Ami, para maipakita talaga na magkakaroon ng improvement, hindi lang dun sa pagbaba ng kaso. That's one of our caution. We're seeing and experiencing rising cases of COVID. All-time high ngayon, and based on projection, tataas pa. Why do we need now to change the rules of the game in the middle of the game? So that's one of the apprehension that we're having. But we were told that it's being done because of economic reasons, and we would like to aim for the total health care of our people, especially the non-COVID reasons for the hardships of our people. Pati yung mga nawawala ng trabaho, yung mga nakakaranas ng pagkagutom. Kaya humingi kami nga ng data sa NEDA, pag-aaral sa NEDA, na maipakita. Sabi nga namin, siguro ang kailangan tingnan yung negative list ng DTI. Yung mga areas na dapat establishments na dapat i-open, yung i-regulate, yung kailangan may compliance na mahigpit o intensify yung compliance sa minimum public health standard. Those things, ang daming pinag-uusapan. Kaya nga, ito nga, it brought us confusion eh. Hindi lang naman tayo ang nalito doon sa mga mag-i-implement, kundi higit pa lahat doon sa mga tao.
Mayor,
Yung mga
tama ba yung
taong umaasa.
perception na yung shift will put a heavier burden on local government units? Tama ba yun? May ganong perception?
Definitely, Ami. Yung pati yung burden, pati yung responsibility, mag-shift dun sa mga local governments. Kasi yung circumstances on the ground na ang magdedetermine whether an area will be locked down. Let us remember, the lockdown will be on a granular basis or a community basis. Kaya nga humihingi rin kami ng technical assistance from DOH on how to effectively implement a granular lockdown in a particular area. Dahil ang prerequisite nun is we need to improve our
Testing and tracing.
turnaround time for contact or for detection and isolation. Here in Marikina, we are a bit fortunate to have our own molecular diagnostic laboratory. So baka hindi namin masyadong maging problema. But our next problem will be whether we have a sufficient facility for treatment and quarantine. Likewise, a sufficient number of healthcare workers that could address the turnaround time for treatment also.
Sir, meron na kayong written kahit draft, written guidelines. Samantalin ko na rin po. Well, parang medyo malinaw naman ang sinasabi nila na granular lockdown. Talagang walang labas-masok yan hanggang matapos yung granular lockdown for around 14 days. So sige, ihiwalay na po natin yan. I think a lot of people are more curious about the level 1 hanggang 4 kasi that will affect everybody else. Yung mga hindi naka-lockdown na granular, ito yung dito pumapasok lahat ng ibang tao eh. Ano pong pagkakaiba ng level 4 doon sa granular? Kasi level 4 ata yung pinakamatindi.
Ed,
kung walang level 5.
magkakaroon ako ng disclaimer doon sa sagot ko ha. Kasi after receiving the written guidelines, we were advised not to articulate on it on the basis that it is not yet final according to IATF. Kaya I will beg the question eh.
Because, pero sir, that was supposed to be in effect already today kung hindi lang na last week kagabi. How could that have been, akala ko malinaw na siya.
To be candid about it, when I received the guidelines.
Pakisteady lang po dahil ni-screenshot namin eh.
The guidelines, for me to fully understand it, kailangan kong i-matrix and i-categorize.
Okay.
Kasi in a memorandum circular, parang tingin ko dapat mas maging malinaw. So, tama naman si Yusek Densing na baka kailangan pa ng panahon ng public. Kasi kung kami medyo nalilito, saka maraming clarification, I think the public deserve more.
No, Mayor,
Pero sir, at the very least po, at the very least po yung differences, I know you don't want to go into details, pero at least yung difference between the granular, which is the hardest, I suppose, and yung the step before that, which would be, I suppose, yung level 4. Kasi yun naman talagang titingnan ng tao eh. Kung ma-level 4 ka, ano ibig sabihin nun? Ano kaiba nun sa granular na?
Actually, Ed, narinig ko yung paliwanag ni Yusek Densing verbatim, that's it. Kung paano niya pinaliwanag yung level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4. Ang sinasabi nga namin, there will be circumstances, instances that will not fit into that category So yun yung namin, tinatanong namin nga sa kanila. In the case, for example, of healthcare workers, how are we going to treat the mobility of healthcare workers? Because under level 4, alert level 4, there will be no movement. Health or even the 41 classification of APOR, authorized persons under authorized persons outside of their
residence.
Okay, will be canceled. So, we're talking of halimbawa, sabi namin, paano naman yung mga nurses na nagtatrabaho sa ospital that kailangan lumabas o umalis dun sa area na na-lockdown kung walang sufficient dormitory that could accommodate their stay in the said lockdown area. Yung mga ganong clarification kami.
Mayor, since hindi pa po tayo pwedeng mag-usap about the details, no? Let me ask a question on a strategic or even a philosophical level. Gaya nga po sabi ni Ami, we all perceive, and it's almost practically an official announcement, that there's this paradigm shift, basically shifting from the national government, de-emphasizing community quarantines, really emphasizing more the responsibility at the local levels. But I think you hinted at it kanina na giving more responsibility is one thing, actually empowering as well LGUs to actually take on that responsibility is another thing. That notwithstanding, assuming that the empowerment is there, philosophically, strategically, is it a better direction to just let the LGUs lead?
There should be a national framework, I think, where we will be able to determine the mechanism for implementation of such policy. We're in effect devolving some of the responsibilities, but the LGU, in particular with this policy shift, what we are asking from the national government is a shared responsibility framework where the resources of the national government would be able to help the resources of the local government in effectively implementing such policy shift, particularly in undertaking granular lockdown in a particular area. Kaya yung isang discussion nga namin ay discussion with DSWD and with NEDA in terms of the resources that we could utilize and employ in the lockdown area. Yung ayuda particular.
Anong sagot doon, Mayor? Is the national government willing to help? Kasi ang pagkakaintindi
Candid.
evolving, you will be in charge of enforcement, of assisting, and pati yung mga yung traditional weaknesses natin, yung testing and contact tracing, sa inyo na mapupunta. Kaya nyo ba yun?
Definitely, the answer to that is that for a longer period, no, we cannot possibly solely and exclusively shoulder those resources for testing, for quarantine. We're talking not only of ayuda Tama ka, Ami Hindi naman ayuda lang ang pinag-uusapan Yung mga doktor na i-employo mo sa mga quarantine and treatment facilities, hindi lang mo pagkain ang kailangan ng na-quarantine. May mga special needs pa yan Kung may mga batang maliliit doon sa area, kung merong may medical requirement, yung mga ganon. To be candid about it, ang sagot sa amin is that they will look into the available resources and they will go back to us to give an answer on how we could categorically share the responsibility. Categorically share the responsibility.
Pero ang malinaw, you will decide kung there's a particular street or sitio or building that will have to be locked down. Yun ang malinaw.
Yun din yung aming nililinaw dun sa proseso. Maging tapat talaga ako sa pagsagot ko sa iyo. Nililinaw nga din namin yun Would that be yung authority for a particular LGU would have the exclusive authority as defined under the local government code that based on the general welfare clause that we could exercise incidental, appropriate, and necessary authority, for example, to lock down a particular area, or do we need some concurrence or imprimatur coming from a particular agency of the national government? Sa kasong to sa IATF. Merong regional IATF sa Metro Manila, and this is yung sa level ng Metro Manila Council. Yun din yung isang mga nililinaw namin. Kasi isang naging problema namin doon, paano ba gagawin namin? Are we going to have a uniform alert level for the whole of Metro Manila? Or pwede ba iba-ibang city, iba-ibang alert level?
Hindi pa rin malinaw, even that. Metro Manila yung ano.
Hindi, ang pinagkasunduan ng mga Metro Manila mayors is that jointly we should approach the problem as a group, as one. The Chairman Benhur Abalos, bibigay ko yung credit sa kanya. Kinausap niya lahat ng mayor dahil we recognize the fact that yung population natin sa Metro Manila commingling magkakasama sa isang lugar. Yung mga boundary natin porous yung nagtatrabaho sa Makati maring umuwi dito sa Marikina o kaya yung taga Pasig dito namamalengke sa Marikina. So jointly we agreed that we will adopt one alert level for the whole of the Metropolitan Manila area.
Okay.
Saka isa pang nilinaw namin whether ito nga is a pilot testing, how long the period it will take, yung mga ganung bagay, yung ganung bagay.
Speaking of, kanina po, beyond yung sa lockdowns and sa alert levels, speaking of that shared responsibility and that shared burden between the national government and the LGUs, how will that look? How will that apply? How should that be rethought with regards to all the other aspects to responding to this pandemic? Everything from vaccine supply to testing and tracing.
There should be, I think there should be statutory obligation, so to speak, in order to clearly determine the capacity of each LGU. Yung capacity namin, for example, in terms of revenue, in terms of the capacity financially to shoulder a particular expense is not the same that of other cities.
Yes.
Because yun Kaya nga tingin ko there should be legislation also on this matter. Parang sharing how to share the expenses for the COVID response. Halimbawa kami, we vaccinate, but yung fund namin or yung pondo namin para sa pagbabakuna ay hindi kasing laki ng ibang bayan na po pwedeng bumili ng maraming bakuna. Kami very limited lang Kaya nga at the outset ng pagbabakuna, sinabi namin ito sa national government, talagang kakailanganin namin yung supply ng bakuna coming from the National Vaccine Operation Center. Robbie, to answer the question, yun lang tingin ko there should be legislation on this matter to clearly identify this yung mga statutory obligation or financial obligation of particular LGU, and we should be able to identify kung ano ba yung items na kailangan talagang malaanan ng tamang resources.
Nung ini-explain po yung shift to the mayors, what was the biggest concern raised or the most common concern raised by the mayors?
Marami Ami. Una yung question, why do we need to shift the policy? Why do we need to take the policy shift?
Anong sinagot yung sa question mo?
NETA presented some facts and figures. Yung isa kanina narinig yung sinabi ni Yusek Densing, yung practicality of closing a big area against the practicality of having a lockdown on a small area. Yung sinasabi nila na 80% of the cases coming from several barangays and not all of the barangays in the city or municipality. Pero sabi nga namin, dapat iyon mapakita talaga clearly doon sa mga datos, doon sa mga data. We're asking for data on a granular basis, meaning on a per LGU basis. Para malinaw, para malinaw. Secondly, we're asking for on all experts' recommendation, not only coming from the health department, but more importantly, dahil nga the idea is to balance yung concern ng economy sa kanong kalusugan from the economic managers. And ayun, and yung mga ganong concern Ami at the outset, yun yung nililinaw nga namin. Dahil magtatanong ang tao bakit tayo, at maraming nag-aalala bakit habang dumadami,
Yes.
para bang gagawin natin GCQ, parang magiging maluag lahat. Sabi nga namin, baka pwede yung protocol, yung mga health protocol maging mahigpit, pero luagan natin yung mga allowable, yung mga establishments that will be allowed to operate for economic reason. So yung negative list dapat ng DTI ang dapat makita at matingnan natin.
Mayor, before we let you go, as you pointed out, over the past 2 days, despite all the confusion, ang isang malinaw is, ito pa rin yung direksyon. Mag-GCQ pa rin talaga, di ba? And then we will shift to granular lockdowns. That seems to be, parang the message seems to still be clear na we just need to clarify the guidelines, make the guidelines, whatever it is, pero ito pa rin ang direksyon. At the same time, what the experts are saying is that ang direksyon ng numbers will still be going up by the time dumating tayo ng September 15. In which case, we are back to a very familiar situation where we will be officially loosen at a time when anxiety will be at a record high. Do you think that can be managed politically?
That's a problem, Robbie, to be casual with my answer. It's problematic. The feeling of our people is that we're in an infinite regress. Kaya tingin ko, we should be decisive on several matters. And we should act with urgency. Ako one of part and parcel ako of the collegial body. One of the mayors lang ako. It's still the IATF who decides. We simply provide our input coming from the ground. Kaya nga ako, I always articulate the fact that the people are now experiencing difficulty, economically speaking. Secondly, the people are worried about our indecisiveness on some issues that they believe in the past 2 years dapat na-action na nagawa na yung mga hospital ba natin, nadadagdagan yung bilang ng mga yung capacity. Yung issue ng healthcare workers natin, yung pa rin bakit hindi na-resolve? Ba't tayo bumabalik doon We could simply articulate, Robbie, on that and try to do our best on the ground at the local level. Given yung namin yung autonomy and our capacity provided by law, we're trying our best to manage the condition on the ground. But hopefully we could put our acts together and move forward as one. More importantly, speak in unison sana. Isa lang sana. National and local.
Luck on that.
Okay. Marikina Mayor Marcy Teodoro, sir, maraming salamat po. Ingat po kayo.
Salamat,
Yes, sir.
Robbie. Salamat. Thank you. Ed, thank you.
And that's all for this special edition of The Chiefs. We hope what was discussed here will keep the conversation going. Before we go, a reminder to everyone, mask on, wash hands, stay safe, Philippines. Magpabakuna po kayo. Ako po si Robbie Alampay.
I'm Ami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star.
I'm Ed Lingao, and we are One News.